Can I go make this hot?
Yeah, you got 2 minutes.
Okay. Oh, that's lovely. Ah, let's knock it down and really give them a show. Yeah. Okay.
Good morning. It is March the 26th. I'm Hal Humphreys, and this is the Appraiser eLearning webinar for March. We're joined today by Diana Jacob, one of the instructors with Appraiser eLearning. She's also runs an education company down in Louisiana and Texas. She is a well-respected educator. The reason you're stuck with me as the host today, and I'm very much sad to announce this, our regular host, Brian Reynolds, has been down with the coronavirus for the past 8 days. He's been fighting it, and it's been a hard time for Brian. So keep him in your thoughts and keep him in your prayers. We expect him to make a full recovery, but this is a very real situation. But Diana is here today to talk to us about how to handle this. And number one, there's a book by Douglas Adams called The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. This is the 42nd anniversary of that book. The cover of the book just says simply, don't panic. And I think that's a very important first step. But from this point forward, the only time you're going to hear from me is when Diana needs to take a break, which can be around the halfway point. But Diana Jacobs, if you would, take it away. It is all yours.
Well, good morning, everyone. Thank you, thank you, thank you for being here. The first people I want to thank is Appraiser eLearning. A lot of you may not know this, and so it's important to know. No one is getting paid to do this. No one. Everyone is here offering this seminar, offering this webinar. Let me explain it, webinar, by their own benevolence. And so thank you guys so much for allowing appraisers an opportunity to have a venue where questions can be asked and we can open up discussion on how to do things. I have to tell y'all, this has been an unprecedented event. And as we see, even one of our own team members, Brian, is personally experiencing this, but we do wish him well. We know he's a fighter and he's doing a good fight. I can tell you that he's doing a good fight. So we're going to look forward to having him come back. When we started out with this particular seminar, we were going to talk about what to do after a national disaster and how we would proceed to go ahead and value during those times. But since then, we've had this pandemic. And a pandemic is very much like a natural disaster, except that we have no physical evidence to touch. We have no debris to clean up. We only have ourselves to make sure we're doing what we can do. And we are going to focus today on some of the information that has come about. I also want to spend, as time allows, a little bit of time about talking about measuring the impact, because so many of you right now are being bombarded with questions of, well, what impact does Corona have on the value of property. And I have to tell you right up front, we're just going to address some of this right up front. You can't measure it. It's not measurable right now, because it's as if you can visualize the onslaught of a tornado or the onslaught of a flood or a fire, you're in the middle of it. It's happening now. It has to come to an end before we can actually begin to talk about the impact. But there are some things you can be doing even right now, and that's gathering data about what was going on a year ago in these locations that you work. What was the volume, the quantity of transactions that happened? How long were the properties on the market for sale? What were the days on the market? What were the financing terms? What were the interest rates? This type of data serves as a base for you to be able to say, when it is time to measure, here's where the changes have occurred. When we talk about the environment, especially today, what we're dealing with is what I remember as a child watching this movie and being petrified. And now there is a remake of it called The Invisible Man. And that is what we are all afraid of, this invisible man that we cannot see. That is why we are doing the distancing. That is why we are staying, sheltering in place. And I can share with all of you, I myself am on a 14-day quarantine because an appraiser whom I spend a lot of time working with and actually socializing with was tested because of an inspection that they did, and they were feeling under the weather, and they went and they said, no flu, no sinus infection. We think you may have the coronavirus. And so they tested her and said, now you have to go home and you have to tell everyone that you were in contact with in the last 24 hours to go on a 14-day quarantine. And so I'm on day 5, and I am happy to report no sore throat, no cough, no fever. I really don't think she has it. I think it's probably a lot of what a lot of us have down here right now, which is allergies and reaction to allergies. But I'm doing what I'm supposed to do. And that's the first thing that I want to talk to you about today, is how do we protect ourselves? You know, the coronavirus is not an airborne disease like measles or tuberculosis. It's a mucus that spreads through uncontained coughing and sneezing by someone who's already infected. This is why we have that 6-foot rule of social distancing. And this is why we are saying to ourselves, if you have to get out, and as appraisers you do, then you need to take some certain protection, wear the face mask. And we're going to go through some of that. I would like to talk to you about some of the issues, which are why appraisers? Why are we not allowed to stay home? You had some information that came out yesterday from the foundation, also from Fannie Mae. And the reason is that you are considered an essential body, an essential worker. This stems way back to the Gramm-Leach-Bliley Act. Do you remember that? Where we were talking about privacy? Well, they defined appraisal as a financial related activity. And so you're a part of that. That is the reason that you're considered essential. Now, essential doesn't mean that you have to walk into the fire unprotected. There are certain things that you can do. The first thing that we need to embrace is our own anxiety that we're having. And we need to find a way to release that anxiety, because it's easy to be afraid. But I said yesterday, and I've said it to a couple of people, fear is a gift, and so is hope. And you get to decide which one you want to receive. You can have either, but it begins with you. And so when we talk about how we're going to deal with this today, the first thing that I want you to understand is that you're not the only one that's having the anxiety. So are the people on the other side of the door whose house you want to knock on and say, I'm the appraiser, just here to do my inspection, you're going to handle that a little differently now. And when you call and make your appointment and talk to them, be prepared that they are going to be interviewing you just as you are going to be interviewing them. One of the interviews that you're going to be giving is, or questions you're going to ask is, have you or anyone in your household had any of the symptoms, even though you may not have been tested? Do you have a fever? Do you have a sore throat? Do you have a cough? And if they ask you the same question, you need to tell them that. One of the things I think you can do every morning when you first get up and say, thank you for the gift of today, is take your temperature. And if you're not running a temperature, yay, you get today. And you're going to move forward. And you can tell them, I took my temperature today and I'm fine. No, I haven't been tested because I haven't been symptomatic. And so I'm asking you the same. Now, some appraisers are saying, well, I just am concerned about touching anything. Well, you don't have to touch anything. And remember, and the foundation was really good with us yesterday about reminding us that, you know, we aren't required by USPAP to do the inspection. What we are required by USPAP to do is to define how we did inspect, how we defined that problem. You know, the first step in the appraisal process is define the problem. And it says in conjunction, in communication with your client, you're going to make some scope of work decisions. So I do want to keep in mind that we don't want anybody to think that they need to just jump out and start doing their own thing. You, in your defining of the problem, have a client, you need to have a discussion with your client to make sure that you're both on the same page and that you're understanding. Understand that everyone is going to have some emotions going on right now. If this were a tornado or a flood or a hurricane, well, we would see people face to face and we would see the remnants of their lives placed on the outer part boundaries of the street or their property lines. We don't have that now. What we have are what looks to be ordinary conditions. Everything physically looks fine, but the invisible man, see, he's hiding, and that's who we are trying to look out for. And so rather than be afraid of the invisible man, let's take the precautions we need to do the job that we need to do. When we do have a chance to see someone at the door, I'm going to tell you one of the best things you can do is smile. Because when you give them a big smile, that's a hug from the heart. And you can say, I know we can't shake hands, but I want you to know I get it. We're all in this together. And I'm here to help you move forward in this unprecedented time. We're all going to be okay. Because we are. But you have to know that inside your heart. I try to focus on a little bit of humor, and every day I work at trying to find something humorous, even in the midst of the mayhem. And I saw a story yesterday, day before, and I think about it because of the children that we have home right now. Everybody's home from school. And the kids don't really understand. They see mom and dad home. They see them interacting more, sometimes not as friendly as they used to be. There's a little tension going on because the kids are there. And so this little boy that was missing his elementary school was asked, do you understand why you're home right now? Do you get it? And he said, well, I do. They ran out of toilet paper. You know what? I think that's so cute, because hasn't that been the emphasis? We've spent as much time looking for toilet tissue as we have trying to talk about this invisible man, the coronavirus, and how we're going to deal with it. Try to find something out that can make you smile, that can make you laugh. Sometimes it means just getting up and walking outside in your own environment. For me, because of the time of year it is, I have roses on my rose bushes. I have lettuce that's growing out of my pots that I grow vegetables in. And I look and I say, ooh, you know what? The world is good. The earth is good today. So you need to find that place. Now, let's we talked a little bit about why you're considered an essential worker. Several states have put this information out. You can go to your state board, usually website. They will tell you why. Maybe your governor made a proclamation, but most of appraisers now realize that we are considered essential workers. And so we're going to be called on to do these types of assignments. What if we have to do an interior inspection? You know, what are some of the things that we can do? And one of the things that we can do is we can have a good conversation with our client before we go out, and we ask them, let's talk about this inspection. To begin with, I want you to know, Mr. and Ms. Client, if they respond, yes, they've had a cough, they've had a temperature, I'm not going to go in. I'm going to reschedule that event. If you want me to continue forward doing another type of inspection, that's going to be strictly up to you. But the best that I could offer you would be to have somewhat of a virtual. If they have a cell phone, and most people do today, you can do a FaceTime virtual type of tour, asking them, the occupants, to walk through each room, show you all four corners, the ceiling, the floor. If you see something, ask a question, ask them to take a picture so that you can see. And if you've measured the outside, you can somewhat pinpoint where they are walking within that dwelling, and note on your sketch anything that it is that you need to note. Let's say that you actually do have to go in. Well, before you go in, you need to give them a heads up on what's going to take place. Hopefully, all of you have some type of protective gear. I have a friend that's up in Iowa who is a fantastic quilter. And she said, you know what I've been doing? I've been making face masks because I have a daughter that's a doctor. And so that seems to be the need. And I said, let me tell you something. I would love to have some of your face masks. And so right now I'm having custom made face masks that are going to be mailed out to me on Friday. Find something that you can use that encapsulates what you kind of this TPT type pyramid zone, so that you cup the chin, make sure that you're over the bridge of the nose, and make sure that you're protecting those air passageways, so that if someone should cough or sneeze, you don't have that happen. Of course, gloves, you want to have gloves, and explain to the occupants, now this is how I'm going to look. I'm going to show up and I'm going to have these things on, not because I think you're infected, not because I'm infected, but because we want to be sure that we are safe for both of us. And so I want you to open up all the doors, turn on all the lights, open up some of the cabinet doors of things that I'm going to want to see, for instance, underneath the sink. Now, it's going to get a little tricky when you have to do things like go up into an attic, because remember, they're not appraisers. And so you may be limited in that, and you may have to have a discussion with some of the clients about certain assignments that you're doing, especially for like FHA, where, they want you to see the attic. That may be a limitation because of that. Ask them if they want you to make this subject to, and go back at another time. Make sure that when you leave the site, before you get in the car, bring a little disposable plastic bag. I use a little grocery sack. I fold them up into little triangles and I stick them in my, what I call my disaster kit. And when I leave, I open up my little plastic bag that I've been carrying around, and I take off my mask, I take off my gloves, and I put them in the plastic bag and I tie them up and I leave them at their doorstep, because that's not for me to bring back to my car, or I can put it in their garbage bag. You want to do what you can to keep as much disinfected as you can. I also find that, carry some disinfectant spray, and if you feel the need, spray yourself down, spray your shoes down, spray your car down before you get started. Obviously, it would be great if you have a hand sanitizer to also put on the hand sanitizer, because that will help. When you get back to your house, and I apologize, I know some of you are hearing my dog in the background, and my dog's excited. They actually see someone outside. I haven't seen anybody for a few days, so bear with me. When you get back to your house, you do need to immediately wash your clothes. So, remove them, put them in the washing machine, go in, take a shower. Even though you've showered that morning, take a shower, because you've been exposed to all of this air, and you want to make sure that you have cleaned yourself up. And then, of course, start the washing machine and get the clothes washed. If we have an exterior only, when lenders allow, we have learned that there are certain things that we can do, certain exhibits that we have to have. We have to understand when we're dealing with this type of issue, we're dealing with anger and we're dealing with stress, and it isn't just the client and it isn't just the occupant. Sometimes it's also our own. And so we need to find that focus place. And maybe that's when we're taking that shower after we get back from the end of the day. But to find that alone time, that alone space, and be grateful. Be grateful for this day that you have, because there are a lot of people today that would like to be in your shoes, believe it or not, because they have families and they can't work and they don't know how they're going to provide. Y'all still have opportunities as appraisers to keep doing the business that you're doing. You're just doing it a little differently. I think it's very beneficial if you prepare a questionnaire, and a very detailed questionnaire. The questions that you would normally like to ask if you could have a long conversation with the occupant. When did you buy your house? What made you decide you wanted to buy your house in this location? Have you made any renovations or improvements to the house since you've been here? What's the purpose? Is this a first-time purchase, or if this is a refinance, did you intend on any of the refinance to be used for renovating the house? Were there any plans that you had that was going to improve the property itself? Because those are the kinds of things, guys, that you want to know when you are in your valuation process. Are you in a flood zone? Do you know? Have you had a survey recently? Do you have any papers that are related to your purchase or past refinances or past renovations that I could have copies of? I don't want your physical copies. I want you to scan them and send them to me PDF so that I can have those. All of those questions that you have that you would normally spend time asking, you can ask on the questionnaire. And that will give you some data gathering, some very relevant data gathering that you would not have an opportunity to have anymore. Depending on where you are, of course, is going to have some type of impact. One of the things that I did put together, and how I don't know if we even have the ability to put it up, but there is a protocol for appraisers during the duration of the coronavirus. I put this together, I don't know, a couple of days after this first became nationally known. And there is a talented young appraiser by the name of Chris Evans, who lives in the Houston area. And he is technology savvy. I mean, I just am in awe of all of the things that he knows how to do. And he took this and put it together with some check boxes and with some graphics. I didn't know, Hal, or Ben, if we had that, if we could show that or not.
I think we can maybe show it.
That's
well,
it, right there. So this is the protocol. This is something that you need to have. It is something that you may also choose if you want to make part of your package, of your inspection package, so that they understand why you're asking the questions that you're asking, and why you're not going to shake hands, and why you're staying across the 6 feet away. I think if you have this, this will help you, and it will help your occupants understand that, you know, safety first, and safety means also safety for them as well as yourself. Part of what we, thank you so much, and I'm going to assume if y'all want a copy of this, they can email you at eLearning. I didn't ask. Is this something that you will be able to make available to them?
Absolutely, we'll make it available to them. We'll take it and put it into a PDF document and provide it to everybody. And this, Diana, I think is a really good chance to take a little bit of a break and get into some of the questions we've got coming from the field. Several people have asked questions, and as we can guess, a lot of them have to do with some insight into extraordinary assumptions, the scope of work. I know you touched on that a little bit, but I think we need to get into that, you know, the assumptions, limited conditions, scope of work a little bit deeper in this next half hour. And then there, you know, Charlie from Michigan says, it doesn't appear as appraisers are essential in Michigan per the governor's order, is still considered a misdemeanor in Michigan to be out. So there are some states that are dealing with the shutdown in that way. And I'm just going to throw a bunch of questions at you, and then when we get back from the break, we can get into these. And I can stay on here and kind of put them to you one at a time. Will the VA allow exterior or desktop appraisals the same way Fannie Mae has done? Does anyone know why Fannie Mae is using 1004 reports for exterior appraisals and not using the correct 2055? All of these questions are out there, and these are kind of the meat of things that a lot of appraisers are concerned about. And the last one I see here is again dealing with the 1004 form. I attended a webinar yesterday with Fannie Mae, and they said they wanted the exterior and desktop appraisals completed on 1004 form. They want the type of appraisal stated at the top of page 1. I think a lot of these things will be answered by the statement, forms are not USPAP compliant.
Correct.
They're by definition not USPAP compliant. They are forms. They're tools that you use to communicate and report your analysis and conclusions. So I don't think we need to get hung up on the form as much as what Fannie Mae asks you to do. You kind of have to do that. But I'll get into these questions again after the break. I do want to say to everybody out there, number one, there are a lot of people in this room. There are a lot of questions coming through. Bear with us. We've only got 60 minutes to get through this information, number one. Number two, thank you for being here. We're really excited that you're all here. This is a really strange time for real estate appraisers across the country. I do want to say, here at Appraiser eLearning, we're all in kind of the same boat. So we're going to offer a discount code through the end of the month for any course you would like to buy from Appraiser eLearning. The discount code is March 2020, MARCH 2020. That's good for a 30% discount. That's the biggest discount we've ever given. We are monitoring this situation. I know everybody says that, but we're trying to stay on top of what we can do to help appraisers through this uncertain period of time. But you know, it's just uncertain. And Diana, thank you again for being here. Let's kind of roll back up through some of those questions and
I
deal
take
with
the 1004 one first, because I think
yeah,
that's
and I will
relevant.
take that, and I may break in and kind of focus a little.
Okay, so one of the questions that Hal forwarded to us that you ask is why the 1004? Why not the appropriate form that says exterior drive-by? And there was some wonderful exchange of knowledge yesterday that we had with instructors at Appraiser eLearning, where we were all talking about the situation and what we could do. And that is one of the questions that came up. And the resolve, which I think is excellent, is that, you know, even though these are unprecedented times, Fannie Mae is still gathering data. And the data is already been formatted in the gathering on the 1004 under the UAD program. And so having that format means that they don't have to change anything in their data gathering process when they review these appraisals as they get sent in by XML. What they will have is the knowledge that in the map reference on the page 1, in the top part of the form, it's going to tell them what type of appraisal that you did, either desktop or exterior. And that's going to give them the signal they have. That one little data point is much easier for them to deal with than trying to do what they want to do using the other types of forms. And the desktop appraisal form, the 1004P, has not been officially sanctioned yet. So it's still in test format. So one of the things that you need to understand is that the lenders on the other side are dealing, you know, we're dealing with our world, our corner of the world, and our amount of doing business. And now we have the other issue, which is the secondary market, and how are they going to, because they're still going to run these tests on us, the security tests are still going to be scored, that type of thing. Do you want me to go to the Michigan question next, or?
Yeah, I think that's not a bad place to go, because there are going to be some jurisdictions where the rules are different. So what do we do with that, Diana?
Okay, so in those areas where the rules have changed and you are not allowed to go outside, this is the first that I've heard about Michigan forbidding appraisers to go out and do inspections, because as of yesterday, I was still in communication with appraisers from Michigan, and that was not the message I got. So this must be a recent occurrence, and I don't think it's an unusual thing to happen. I would have to imagine, I don't know, but I would have to imagine New York is in quite a panic right now because of the escalation that they have had. I mean, they are, unfortunately, the epicenter of where this is going on. And I can tell you that in Louisiana, we are right up there in terms of the per capita. When you look at how fast it is spreading per capita, I mean, right now we are at almost 2,000 cases, and we've had, I think it's 67 deaths. So that's quite a lot for a state the size of us. So if you are, let's just say you're in those areas where they say, no, I do not want you to go out. You know, there are other tools that you have, other practices that you can give them where you're not actually looking at the site. I mean, how many of you have thought about offering the service of doing a marketability study based on the data that you have been able to glean from the public, and make the phone call to the client, and possibly with the FaceTime abilities that you have, you can get a really good idea without ever leaving your house, what that house looks like. You can study the data that you have available, and you can offer them some opinions about the economic viability of the neighborhood and where the subject lies within the predominant cluster of houses that are situated in that boundary.
Yeah, and there are a number of things that appraisers can do as alternate services. I think this is another again, we're going to go back to like the questions from the field are primarily dealing with, what can I do today with the thing that I'm not used to doing? Pamela Teal asks, is it your understanding that it will still be a lender by lender decision as to when an inspection will be required? And I think the answer to that is, yeah, that's always the case.
Absolutely. We cannot go off like Don Quixote fighting the windmills. We have to know that the very first step in defining the appraisal problem is to have a good conversation with your client. Why are you ordering this appraisal? What kind of appraisal are you ordering, and why are you ordering it? So it has to begin with them. They have to be the first to give you the permission. Listen, if they ask you to do something that you're not comfortable in doing, you have a business decision to make. And sometimes the business decision is no. I talked with an appraiser yesterday and he said, Darren, I don't feel like I have any other choice but to shut down. My son had a heart transplant when he was 6 weeks old. He's on an anti-rejection drug. Every time I step out and go do an inspection, even though I come home and I take my clothes off, put them in the washer, go straight to the shower, I still feel like I'm compromising my home environment. If you feel that way, don't. You're going to have to make some business decisions here. But it begins with, remember, the lender letter said temporary flexibilities. That begins with the client understanding. What do they want you to do? And what kind of conversation have you had with them? Please do not take it upon yourself to go out and say, well, I'm allowed because. First person that gives you permission is your client. Thanks, Pam.
Yeah, that's a great bit of advice there. And I think, at the end of the day, this gets back to scope of work and defining the problem. Right now, part of the problem is, how do we gain access to properties? How do we deal with the lack of access to properties? That's going to be on a case-by-case basis. You're going to have to talk to your client and work with them on a scope of work that makes you comfortable and services their needs. And that's a conversation that we all have to have with our clients. I think it's going to be on a case-by-case basis.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. You can't just say in San Antonio or Lafayette, Louisiana, this is how we're going to do this. It has to be literally case by case because every case is different. Yeah, I have a niece that works in a hospital. She has cystic fibrosis. She has a very delicate health situation, but her passion is healthcare. And even Chelsea is fighting the good fight, and she is in that hospital doing that type of work. I know we're all anxious, and that's understandable, but you think about the other people that are out there putting their lives on the line during this time. What we're being asked to do is really minuscule. What was it that we heard yesterday where they said, this is a war, but unlike other wars where they had to go into battle with guns and helmets, all we're being asked to do is stay home. There's a huge difference in the sacrifice. What other question did we have?
I think that covers most of the questions. And the point you just made, I mean, our grandparents were asked to, cross the ocean and fight the good fight. We've been asked to sit on our butts and watch television. So we got this, guys. As far as appraisers, though, I really do believe that there is a chance to have that conversation with your client and say, look, if you're uncomfortable going into houses, and I get it, I would not be comfortable going into someone's house that I don't know without a serious amount of protective gear. But there are ways to do this work that don't require you to go physically inside the property. Talk to your clients and say, hey, right now I'm not comfortable with this. I can provide you a credible assignment result within these parameters. And then when this is all over, maybe we can go back and look inside the property and verify and update the report. But it's a conversation you're going to have on a case-by-case basis. So,
and
Diane,
for those of you that are not able to get out and do those, I'm serious about marketing yourself, especially in the neighborhoods that sending out letters, emails, whatever means that you need, saying, I'm an appraiser in your neighborhood, and I get that you're anxious about what's going on right now. If there are some specific questions that I can help you with, a market analysis that possibly would enable you to make some decisions that you're thinking about making in the near short term, I offer that service as well, and we can make that arrangement. You can market yourself to do that type of thing and not have to do appraisals. We have a skill set, guys, that we have often forgotten how important it is to the community, and we can use it for other things, not just mortgage lending.
Absolutely. There's been a lot of questions about how, if I'm going to change my 1004 form to do a drive-by or a desktop appraisal, how do I address the issues of non-compliance with USPAP and not come across as potentially misleading? We had a conversation with the National Association of Appraisers and several of the educators with Appraiser eLearning last night. And this was one of the things we all talked about, is how do you craft that language, and how do you put it in the report in a way that is clear and not misleading? Can you talk to us about that a little bit, Diana?
I can't, and I actually did write a sample comment, and I don't know if Ben can find it. It was on page 6 of my outline. And so if you're able to find it, Ben, and put it up on the screen, that would be very helpful. To begin with, we need to remember inspecting is not a USPAP requirement. There you go, right there. One of the things that we absolutely do want to make clear is that we are rendering an opinion of value without studying the impact of the coronavirus. And the reason that we want to make that clear is, to begin with, it's not measurable right now. Also, when this flattens and we begin to start coming back into normal, what we're going to see is not pockets of subdivisions like we do in floods or tornadoes. We're going to see that the whole town or the whole area has had the same exposure. So any changes will be economic in nature. Our buying pools got smaller. The credit scores.
I think that's one of the things, when we started prepping for this webinar earlier in the month, the idea was to do looking for the rainbow, appraising properties after natural disasters. And then we're looking at this COVID virus issue. This is a natural disaster. It's just not visible. There's not, hang on one second, Diana, you go ahead.
All right, so if you're looking at the screen, you can see the impact of the coronavirus is currently being experienced nationwide. Daily, there are new economic reports and strategies being developed by our government, nationally, statewide, and locally. The static factor has just begun to impact our day-to-day behavior. As a consequence, it must be understood this appraisal has been developed with current transactions that were prior to the last 3 weeks. Those transactions did not exchange during the corona environment. Now, you may want to massage that a little as time goes on, but it will probably ring true for at least a week or two in terms of the last 3 weeks. Whenever you've had a transaction, one of the things you can say is these transactions did not exchange during the effective date corona environment. Because remember, we're studying the past. This appraisal report is a conclusion of analyses that represents before the impact of corona was a factor. To date, due to the constant change, COVID-19 is not a factor that can be measured. For that reason, the conclusions drawn will have a margin of error due to that uncertainty. This means on any given subsequent week, this economic environment may change and have consequences to the value. Real estate markets do not move suddenly as stock markets. Based on the current request for voluntary sheltering in for at least 30 days, It will be a minimum of 60 days from the effective date before any measurement of market reaction can be performed or considered in the current market value. When you give that kind of disclosure, what you have done is you have set everybody on a basis of, all right, any considerations I need to make are on my understanding or my risk. Now, one of the things y'all have to remember is you're still forecasting marketing time. And I think that is also where you may want to make a second comment and say, all right, my marketing time is based on the past plus these 30 days, 60 days, whatever that time period is. My state is on a state shutdown. So, you know, we're here until the middle of April. They want us to stay put unless it's an emergency or an urgency for that. They also have people who are volunteering to go make grocery runs for those of us who are of an age where they don't want us to be exposed. So, you know, you have to make the decision about what you base it on. You know, tell them what you did. How did you make your decision? Forecasting right now, in normal circumstances, you would usually have a much shorter days on the market because this is the beginning of our peak period of exposure for most residential properties. But it's not going to be the same if everyone is limited. You have a couple of things going on. Number one, the shutdowns. And so, of course, that has an impact because people's work and employment is changing. So that's also going to have an impact. So you need to consider those things and state how you handle that. If you didn't consider it, that's okay too, but state that you didn't consider it. So just make very clear in your assumptions how you handled it.
Yeah, and I think that one thing you just said is a thing that we have to come back to as real estate appraisers. You can be USPAP compliant and do any number of things as an appraiser, as long as you state what you did, explain what you did, tell people what you did, and don't mislead people. So there are a lot of opportunities here to talk to your client up front and then explain in the report, here's what I did and here's why I did it. I have a lawnmower going in the back yard next to me. So if this is it too noisy?
No, I have a dog that still gets excited when somebody goes outside. So I apologize if my dog.
You want to get to one comment scenario from an appraiser, AEL follower named Rebecca, and this is the kind of thing that concerns me. She accepted an inspection with a sick borrower who did not live at the home being inspected. They agreed that the borrower would not be there. The borrower showed up and then followed her around. These are the kind of things that boots on the ground real estate appraisers are dealing with. And if you're uncomfortable with being that close to people, and the directives from the CDC, of the World Health Organization, are either 3 feet or 6 feet, you know, distance. If someone's going to be that close to you, I think it's fine to walk away and call your lender and say, this person is not respecting my space. But these
absolutely. I would make the call while I was walking out, and I would turn the camera around.
Yeah,
you know,
these are real things.
you know, you have to respect yourself first. And if they're not showing you respect, shame on you. And I'm not talking about being ugly or saying anything, but, you know, you can say, I'm disappointed that you're here because you've cut the inspection short. You were told, and I ask that you not be here to protect everyone involved. I have to leave now because of your decision. And then you walk out.
You know, Diana, I'm wondering, you know, we're all concerned about the interior part of the inspection. There is no use PAP requirement for an inspection. A lender requires you to do an interior inspection. Talk to me about, you know, if you're in a situation like that and you're inside the property and you feel uncomfortable, you have to leave, but you've been inside the property, can you say I've inspected the interior?
That's an interesting question. And I think that it's a yes and a no, both. I think what you can say is I was able to physically enter into the interior, but I was limited during the inspection process and failed to observe X, X, and X. Maybe it was the 3 bedrooms, maybe it was the bathroom, whatever it was. And say, you know, it could have been that you entered and all you had was the living room. And that's all that you got a chance to see. Based on that condition, you know, y'all know the language from years ago. Based on my observed condition from the exterior, or based on what I saw from the interior, from this limited space, assuming all other spaces are of similar condition, this is how I'm making my judgment. If it is found to be untrue in the future, then this could impact my assignment results.
Yeah, and at the end of the day, this falls into the first round of questions we had in the first part of the webinar is scope of work and assumptions and limited conditions. In both of those things, the scope of work allows the appraiser to define, here's what's necessary to produce a credible assignment result. I need to do these things. If you agree, if your client agrees with that and y'all come to terms on an assignment, bully for you. Then the assumptions and limiting conditions part lets you say, I was unable to do this, but I think I can still come to a reasonable, supportable conclusion. If this is found to be not true, the point is we're communicators.
Correct.
And you have to communicate what we did and what we did not do and be clear and not misleading. That's the key. Be clear and not misleading.
I think it was interesting and a really excellent comment that was made in the lender letter that came out from Fannie Mae, the 2020-04. I think it was issued on the 23rd. It said if there's insufficient information about the property for an appraisal, for an appraiser to be able to complete an appraisal assignment with a desktop or an exterior, the loan will not be eligible for delivery to Fannie Mae. So it comes back exactly how to what you were saying. There are some business decisions we need to make. Can we be comfortable? Pam Teal, who's one of the ones that's on the call, and she answered a question. She's incoming president of the ATA, and she is a mentor for the state of Texas. She deals with complaints and in her mentorship. And so often it comes down to appraisers just absolutely failing to say what they did. When you have the ability to explain, not trying to cover up, not trying to hide, to say this is what I saw, and based on this, you know, this is what I believe. I know this is probably an odd time to tell the analogy, but I'm reminded of the young girl who was preparing her Christmas dinner for the first time, and her mother was in the kitchen and they were frantically trying to get this together, and the grandmother was sitting in the living room, and the mother said, now, did you cut both of the ends of the ham off? And she said, yes, I did, Mom, I did. She said, well, you have to do that or it won't turn out right. She's like, I don't understand why we're doing it. And she said, I don't know, but it's what Grandma did and we always do it and it always turns out, so this is what you have to do. So the young girl decided, you know, that just doesn't seem good enough for me. And so she goes into the living room and she said, Grandma, we're trying to put the ham together. And Grandma said, well, that's good. Did you cut the ends of the ham off? She said, yeah, Grandma, I did. And that's what my question is. Why do we cut the ends of the ham off? And the grandmother looked up at her and smiled and said, I've wondered that for years about your mother. I did it because my pan was too small. You know, we have to take things for what they are, not what we're afraid they might be. Look at what you looked at. Assess it for what you can. Give the parameters of what you saw and say, based on this, this is what I believe to represent that current market value.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I do want to break in here real quick and say, again, I'm going to drive this point home. We're real estate appraisers. We're communicators. You have to communicate with your client up front. You have to communicate with the client in the report at the back end of the assignment. You need to be clear and concise and be very upfront and honest about what you did and did not do. Any language that you include in your report that disclaims things or says I did or didn't do this. If you're going to make it sound legalese, maybe run it by an attorney first. Talk to an attorney, talk to someone about the language you're going to put into your report. We will make available on the Appraiser eLearning website all of Diana's sample comments and the protocol document that she's provided today. We'll put that up on the Appraiser eLearning website, and it will be up there in a perpetuity. You can download it, you can access it. We've also got some information and advice, not legal advice, but advice for appraisers from Craig Capilla up in Chicago. He is an attorney that works with appraisers on a regular basis. We will make that information available as we can. We're also going to be hosting another webinar with the NAA next week. We're not sure what day and we're not sure what time, but in that webinar, we'll talk about and we'll provide some statements and things you can put in your reports to cover the issues of how we're communicating. We're running right up against the end of the time allowed for this webinar. I do want to ask you from Appraiser eLearning, right down underneath the screen here on your YouTube channel, there's a subscribe button. Go ahead and subscribe to our YouTube channel. It will keep you updated with stuff as we come out with it at Appraiser eLearning. It doesn't cost you anything. It helps us out. It helps us keep you more informed about the current business climate and things that are going on. So take just a second, look down below the screen, click on subscribe, do that now. Diana, we've got just a few more minutes.
I have one more thing. I have one more thing I want to say. I want you to look at that lender letter certification scope of work, and I want you to compare it to your current one in the 1004 so that you can see where those differences are. You were told to cut and paste, and so you need to be aware. You need to read each one. Ask yourself if you could do those things. If you can't, make sure that they understand when you can exactly what, how said. The last thing I'd like to say is, again, thank you, Appraiser eLearning, because I think now, above all other times, when you could have chosen not to, you stepped up and you said, let me gather the educators, let me gather the instructors, let me gather the people that I think would know how to discuss the topics that are at hand, because we want to reach out to the appraisers. And it was a benevolent gesture. It was all done for free. And I really, really appreciate it, because I think the appraisers everywhere want to know that there are people they can talk to and places they can go that they can trust for good information. So thank y'all so much for hosting this webinar.
Diana, thank you for the kind words, and thank you for giving your time to be here and help share your knowledge with the appraisal community. I'm Hal Humphreys. This is the Appraiser eLearning webinar for the month of March. Again, I want to end this webinar very briefly with a call for you to spend some time in thought and prayer for our colleague and friend, Brian Reynolds, who has been suffering from the COVID virus for the past several days. People, this is a real thing, and it can impact you personally or friends personally. Just be very careful out there. Keep doing the work you do. Be as safe as you possibly can, and pay attention to our news feed and our emails and our Facebook feeds and all of those things, because we'll be coming back next week with a webinar from the NAA and some more information on how to proceed in these uncertain times. Again, Diana, thank you so much for being here. Final words from you.
A big hug to everybody out there. We are resilient. Appraisers are resilient. They're adaptable. We don't like change, but we get change. It's always constant, and we always adapt. You are the bravest bunch and the most educated bunch, and the people I like to be around the most. So thank you for allowing us to share what we know. If you have any questions, forward them, and I promise you they will forward them to me, and we will get an answer for you.
That's right. We'll do our best. Now, I will say one last thing. We've got just a couple of minutes. The entire crew at Appraiser eLearning is working today. Everybody seems to be working from home, including me. You can see my backyard in the screen here. I know that our intern, Aaliyah, is compiling all of the questions from the YouTube feed into a document. So we're going to have all of the questions and comments that you've had to say today, and we're going to try and address as many of those as possible, as quickly as possible. And we'll put that out probably in an email update or something like that. But we're paying attention. We're here to offer any support we can to the appraiser community. If there's anything you need, don't hesitate to reach out to us, either through Facebook or direct email to Ben, or anything we can do, let us know. That is it for today's webinar. Diane, again, thank you. And everybody in the room, thank you for being here.